Hello there. Long time no see, my friend. Couple topics I was thinking about covering today, and one of them is the need to work when you don't want to, which is pertinent to me not doing this video in so long. More of a self reminder. And then the other one is an observation about how our culture is siloing and the natural fracturing or siloing of our culture is causing a lot of men to live in isolation. So, those are sort of the two things I'm thinking about covering. So, um, given that, we may have a cat joining us, but we may not. She didn't love the look of the fire, so maybe she won't. But anyway, on that note, I'll start with the subject of work and whether you want to work or whether you don't want to work and all of that sort of thing. So, I must have been in my mid 20s when I realized that you don't need motivation to work. Um, for most, or maybe all of my life before that, I sort of believed that there was some kind of inspiration, some kind of pull that you should have, something that you're looking for in order to start working. And it wasn't until my 30s that I realized that's really not realistic and that you're not always going to want to do anything really. And so, whether or not you want to ultimately can't determine whether you do it or not. That's what I realized. And it was important for me to realize that because I had been crippling myself by not taking action on things that realistically needed to happen. So, the sentence I came up with for this idea is that motivation is the unnecessary step between an idea and an action. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have motivations. It just simply means that in that moment, you may not feel motivated when you start working. And that's okay. You don't need to. Um, for about a month now, I've had it in the back of my head that I should do a video. And I just kept not doing it. And there wasn't really a good articulated reason. I just kept not doing it. And part of the reason might be simply that I've been smoking most of my cigars at lounges lately rather than at home. Been spending a lot of time outside lately. When I come home, for the most part, I've been going directly to bed. This is one of the first times where I've actually spent time and fully rested and um, gave myself space to do it, I guess. And when I say that motivation is the unnecessary step between action, um, you do need some to some extent to have the ability to do it, but you don't need to want to. And I'll confess, I really didn't want to get up today and make this video. I really didn't want to sit down and record something, but I know I'll never get to the end of my vision if I don't. and I've already given myself so much time since the last video. I was originally derailed because I went to Oregon to see my family, and I got horribly sick on the way, and I think I had the flu and COVID at the same time. So it's pretty nasty, and I didn't really fully recover for almost a full month. Um, it was very uncomfortable, and I was wretchedly ill. And anyway, blah blah blah. That took about a month to recover from, and then I don't know. I give myself 1, 2, maybe full months of basically doing nothing. Spent a lot of time at lounges, hung out with friends, got to know some cool women in the area. Basically, just kind of living my life and dove into a lot of experiences. But experiences are important at some fundamental level. You know, life is a series of experiences. So I do think it's important to have them, but life is more than a series of experiences because life has sort of a structure to it. And there's sort of a narrative structure to a person's life. And so if you don't participate in the molding of that narrative, if you don't ever pick up the pen and become intentional with what you write, then you just basically flow through the deterministic pattern. So, for example, you have biological impulses, you have chemicals and hormones in your body which are acting on you and pushing and pulling you in this way and that way. And if you don't become intentional, you'll become a slave to your own emotions and desires. So there are many sort of religious institutions, or at least spiritual institutions, which have observed this phenomenon, and some of them describe this as the third eye awakening or becoming the watcher. The watcher is the one who watches yourself from your thoughts, etc. Um, I call it activation of freedom of will, becoming the free man. Whatever you call it, it doesn't really matter, but the purpose of the message is the intentionality to no longer be a slave. That's very important. And it is necessary for proper living. So once you've identified a goal and it's something that you desire to accomplish, this is even further to the point that, motivation becomes even less necessary because now you have a driving value and a goal. And those things should serve as major drivers towards that outcome that you desire. And one of my goals is to develop and grow a channel. And so if I'm not acting in accordance with that goal, I'm squandering my potential. And so I told myself that I would release about one video a week, let's say, and I've been not doing that for a couple months. So, um, not acting in alignment with my own goals and my own proposed values, etc. So I'm getting back on the horse. I'm not punishing myself for it. I'm just simply getting back on the horse and we're moving forward again. And the other subject that I considered touching on today was fellowship, men in fellowship, and how it's becoming increasingly difficult for men to find social settings where they can come together and One of the things that I've been enjoying about going to the cigar lounges is that it's a majority of men who show up, and everyone there is very quick and easy to talk, and you can spend time with like-minded individuals, or even if they're not like-minded, you're still spending time with men, and quite frequently it's the case that the same people show up over and over and over again. So, you get these acquaintances and you get good conversations out of this, and I think it's very important for men to do this, and there's a temptation for men right now to basically look around at the landscape, not only the cultural landscape, but the landscape of ideas and the incentive structures which exist. And I think a lot of men simply opt to give up. And I'm very sympathetic to this because I think that we've basically butchered every incentive structure for men that existed. Um, we've basically ruined every market in terms of the dating market is not very promising for young men, which is the reason why the majority of Gen Z men are single and not looking. It's not because they're stupid, it's because they're intelligent enough to see the incentive structure doesn't line up. There's not enough there to motivate action. Um, and as we are increasingly siloing as people, which is an effect produced by the internet, women are spending more and more time in groups of echo chambers like TikTok where they can negatively reinforce stereotypes about men and agree in circles about how terrible they are, which is a very, very common thing on TikTok, especially in the dating sphere. I don't know what they call it, femme sphere, something like that. Um, and then they can kind of like privately agree on what standards and expectations they have of men with no input or feedback from men at all. So they just basically decide as women what they want from men and then agree not to go for anything else. Um, that's definitely not going to go very well for them, but hopefully we will get through that without too much trouble. Although I don't see that being likely. I think it's going to be, I think there's going to be a lot of single people in Gen Z based on what I'm seeing online. Um, I recently went on a date with a girl who was in her 20s and very intelligent girl, very sweet girl. She asked me how my dating had been going, and I said, "Well, I'm getting a lot of initial interaction. I have a lot of interest, um, and I have a lot of options. There's a lot of people out there who are interested, and um, that's not the issue. The problem is I'm not finding people." Uh, Finding good quality people, but I'm not finding people that I would marry. You know, it would take a lot. It would take a lot to show me that somebody's worth marrying. And the reason for that is because of the incentive structures I was referring to earlier. The incentive structures are so bad for men in the financial institution that we call marriage. Um, the contract is so lopsided and just it's just such a bad deal. The way that our culture and our government views men as basically optional, and children as sort of belonging to the woman, um, which never used to be the case in history. It always used to be the case that children would go with the men in a divorce, and that man could go financially support those children, go find a new wife, have more children with the wife, financially support all of the children together in that home, raise those children. And that freed the woman to go find a new man and have a new family as well. Because men realistically are not likely to choose a woman who has children from another man to marry her. It's just it's a lot. They're not really going to have authority in their own home if they do that, because they're always going to have to consider the stepchildren's father, what he thinks about how the stepfather is interacting with his children, even though they're living in his house. So, really, the kinds of men that women end up choosing pretty often are, for stepfathers, are men who really don't have a house of their own, who have to basically move in with their new wife. They're kind of like, it's like a boss babe situation, and the new husband moves in with her. That tends to be what ends up happening. So, and that can work if their personality types are wired a certain way, but um, that would never work for me. I can't imagine having to think about what I do, like whether or not I have permission to do something in my own house. That's never going to be the case for me. Anyone who comes into my house is going to understand that this is my house. And that means that everything that happens in here is happening my way. And it's as simple as that. Otherwise, they don't get to come into this space. And I just see any man who thinks like me with the current cultural landscape is going to have a hard time finding somebody. It's not the way our culture's set up. It's not the way our society is programmed. So, because of that, men like me have to be very careful. We have to be very careful about who we invite around. Um, and so you're looking out at the incentive structures and the way everything is, and you're thinking, the best case scenario is I find a nice woman who wants to be taken care of. We have a family together. I basically work my butt off and provide for everyone, and the children are raised, and everything goes well. That's becoming less and less realistic. So the second best case scenario is something like, you find someone who's pretty independent, and you give each other a lot of space, and in the imperfection, you just hope that you can make something good enough. But I think the likelihood that that one works out is pretty low, because fundamentally, the incentive structure for that style of relationship is like, you know attraction and warm sentiment. If you don't have attraction and warm sentiment in that kind of like dually hyper independent relationship, it's going to end. It's going to end as soon as the attraction and the warm sentiment ends because there's really nothing else holding it together. The likelihood that you're always going to be attracted and have a warm sentiment to your partner is pretty low across a long enough time horizon. So I think the notion of, relationships being a lifelong thing is kind of, it's probably a thing of the past. Um, I think that probably most relationships in our culture will last somewhere between 5 and 10 years. If they're long, if they're that kind of committed relationship. Knowing this, I would recommend to most men that they don't get married in the first place. You have to have someone in front of you who just, there's almost like a fairy tale magical thing going on for you to want to commit and marry them. Because basically in the modern institution of marriage with no fault divorce, um, they just leave. I mean, it's just that simple. Like, you're just not going to be able to keep them. When I say keep them, I do mean the way that a lot of people are probably concerned. Marriage is kind of like a mutually binding contract, almost along the lines of like property. Like the wife owns her husband, the husband owns his wife. Like they're mutually bound together. They're kind of like the same person. The same way that you kind of own your body and you kind of own your arm, you know. You're like extension, you're an extension of one another. And so people get very squeamish about this, but if that's the premise, then you want to enter that very carefully with someone who can just walk away at any given time and take half your stuff. And even for the ladies now, you guys need to start worrying about this too, because women are graduating and they have higher quality degrees than men on average. They have higher success rates. They have higher graduation rates. A lot of ladies are going to be earning more than their male counterparts in the near future. You guys are going to have to be very cagey and careful with your money. You're going to have to understand that that marriage contract is mutually binding, that he's going to own a part of what you have. He's going to own a part of you, and he will have access to no fault divorce. He'll be able to leave and take half for any reason, just like all the men are complaining about right now. And I think that as a culture, we're gonna look at the institution of marriage very warily, with a great deal of skepticism, especially given the fact that our nation is radically secularizing, radically and rapidly secularizing, and the belief in a higher power has really never been less prevalent than it is today. So I'm very pessimistic about the notion of lifelong relationships and how common they are and how, uh, this is very unfortunate. And the reason I'm going into depth on this is because the nuclear family is the most powerful. Um, it's the most powerful unit in a society. It has always been, and it always will be. Nothing makes better, stronger children than a family. So it is, it is ominous that this institution, which produces the best and the brightest, is failing. And we love to blame teachers for the rapidly declining rates of education success, and we think that we need to fund the public school system to fix this problem, but that will do absolutely nothing because the vast majority of the problem is that children are not being raised in nuclear households anymore. So that's where almost all of the issue is. That's where almost all of the failure in the public education system is coming from. That's where almost all of our cultural and societal issues are coming from. So really, the fact that men and women don't really like each other is sort of the premier problem of our time. It's really the problem to solve for our culture. If we don't like crime rates, that's the problem to solve. If we want an educated population, that's the problem to solve. If we don't like to see homelessness, that's the problem to solve. It's so fundamental and bedrock to the success of our people that it is it is totally valid to be that level of reductionistic about it. And so, um, well, the reason I got into all of that is because one of the things that I think that men should do is to gain fellowship with other men. And part of the reason that's a partial solution to this problem is because women are successfully doing that and men are not for the most part. And so this is causing the male loneliness epidemic that many people are talking about. Because as I said before, men are looking out at the landscape. They don't see optimism. They don't see open arms. They don't see a welcome. They don't see anything good, really. They see terrible incentive structures left, right, and center. And they give up and they go play video games. They become addicted to pornography. They do basically anything to spike dopamine. They go into dopaminergic cycles, video games, porn, drugs, um, other risky behaviors, casual sex, hookup culture, whatever they can to spike dopamine, basically. And they don't have any serotonin built up. They don't have any oxytocin either. So they don't have the two sort of like hormonal defense mechanisms that work really well against becoming addicted to dopamine. Serotonin is kind of like a dopaminergic defense mechanism, and oxytocin does the same thing to some extent. It's much harder to be addicted to pleasure when you have these like deeper, more meaningful um, fulfillment drivers in place. So um, basically, if you can find a way to go hang out with the bros and have some nice deep conversations, I encourage you to try to do that in person because online is not quite the same. And to the extent that you can stop being so cerebral, my cats are clawing the chair. I hate it when they do that. It's a beautiful chair. To the extent that you can stop being so cerebral, get out of your head and into your body, that will be a benefit to you as well. Um, because when you're in a dark space, when you're in a place you don't recognize, when you don't see the way forward, sometimes the best thing to do is just simply start walking. Pick a direction and go. You don't necessarily need to know what you're doing or why you're doing it yet. A lot of times the terrain will tell you which way you should go. I am imbued with a sort of naive sense of optimism. And what's funny about that is that when I put it to the test, it always seems to work. So I no longer believe that it's naive. I believe that it's actually correct. No matter how bad things look, no matter how hopeless they appear to be, one small, unfounded, it doesn't even have to be clear why, act of bravery can completely turn the tide. And it has been the case in my life many times over that no matter how things look and no matter how bad they appear to be, just one simple local act of heroism can be the thing that changes everything. And the direction and the reason and the source and everything doesn't matter very much. Because I'm of the opinion that everything matters. I'm as far away from nothing matters as a person can be. I tried. I test ran nothing matters. It doesn't work. It does exactly what you'd expect it to do. It makes everything worse. Not only does it make everything worse, but it makes you cynical. It makes you sneer when the good thing happens because you're waiting for it to be proven wrong. And then its inverse is so beautiful because when the bad things are happening and when you're looking around at the darkness, you're saying, I'm not sure how this is going to serve me, but the ending to this story is going to be phenomenal. This is such a spectacular drama that's going to be used to elevate the conclusion. And I don't even know how I'm going to get through this, but I can't wait to see. Everything matters changes everything. The entire world becomes tool shaped. The camera is no longer a piece of technology, it's a tool to be used in facilitating dreams, as is the microphone, as is the computer, as is the internet, as is my car, as is my house. Everything matters. Whether I wake up today matters, whether I make this video matters, how I spend my time matters. Whether I work that day when I really didn't want to, that matters. Whether I succeed matters, whether I fail matters. Whether we fix our culture matters, whether men and women learn to like each other or not matters. If the birth rate decreases, that matters. If our politicians don't have our best interest in mind, that matters. If they do, that matters. If the right and the left hate each other and can't communicate, that matters. If fringe political factions infiltrate the majority parties, that matters, etc., etc., etc. Everything matters. My cat hears a cat outside meowing, and he's so curious about what's going on. And that matters. He doesn't even notice the window on the lizard on the window. This is an exceptionally good cigar. Holy cow. Every time I come back to this cigar, I'm reminded by how good it is. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but phenomenal, phenomenal cigar. Whether I decorate my house or not matters. How I feel when I walk into it matters. Whether I take good care of my cats matters. Everything matters. And so, what I hope for is that we as people can learn to like each other again while we disagree with one another, because that's going to be the case. We need to find respect for the sanctity of the individual, for the sanctity of the spirit of what it means to be a human being. It's sacred. Whether or not you believe in transcendentals is very important. If you don't believe in anything transcendental, it's going to be very hard for you to understand why any of this could be true. Basically, it's important that you are not the highest thing. It's important that something is higher than you and you can aspire to live up to it and to measure up to it. And I'm attempting to do that, and I'm not always doing it well, but I'm attempting to do that in my own small way. Anyway, my friend, I think I'm going to end the video here, but in summary, men, you should try to find fellowship. You should try to find places where you're loved and where you're welcomed and where you have community. You should try to find optimistic people to spend your time around. You should try to avoid dopaminergic binging and attempt to activate some serotonin and some oxytocin as defense mechanisms against it. And hopefully we can figure out how to fix this culture, which is very backwards and upside down. I believe we can, and I believe we will. But the speed at which we do it is very crucial, because people are going to get hurt and waste a lot of time, and a lot of people are not going to be able to afford what that means for them in their lives. It's going to be very sad. So a lot of people are going to die alone without the children they want. It's very, very sad. So we need to figure out how to fix this. And men, the first step is finding your purpose, finding your goals, activating against well, towards their standards, conforming to their standards, and trying to live up to them, and becoming aware and enlightened that everything matters, and that all of your time matters, and that you shouldn't be wasting it, because it's crucially important. You're too valuable to go to waste. So don't allow that to become your fate. Um, thank you for watching. I hope that you take this as a white pill, not as a black pill. That somehow this dramatic narrative that we're all living through can be used for something very beautiful and wonderful and magical, and it's up to us to make sure that that happens. So, bless you all. Have a lovely day. Thank you very much. Bye bye.